Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, we're going to be talking about whether your partner is asexual and what this can mean. Before we dive into that topic, please do subscribe. You can always subscribe by the linked subscription link in the description, and you get access to 136 or more episodes, most recently about child-centered marriage and what that actually means and doesn't mean. And some people say you should put your husband before the kids. Ain't never gonna happen. Oh, who says that? Why? What is the healthy approach? Etc. All of that is discussed in the prior episode, which is subscriber only. Okay, so here's the thing, is that some people come in and they have sexual issues. Many people come in with sexual issues to my practice. And there are different types of sexual issues. So sometimes the people have had a great sexual relationship in the past, and now it's fallen off due to the lack of honeymoon stage hormones, a point which I beat to death constantly, and age and stage and perimenopause and her antidepressants and her birth control pill and the fact that he could be a real asshole and whatever. Various things, externalities, internalities, etc. However, there are some people that have a different way that they conceive of sex, and they never liked it, and so they never wanted to have sex. They thought that sex was part of a relationship, so they did it. They've never really had an orgasm. Maybe they have sometimes, but they don't really care one way or the other. Their body works. They can have sex. Maybe they can have an orgasm. They have no interest in sex, and they never did. And the partner didn't understand this, so they just thought that the person was kind of thinking the same as they did about sex, but the partner wasn't. So this partner may be asexual. So asexual means that you do not have any interest in sex. You don't want to have sex. You don't really understand why people make such a big deal about sex unless you're, more philosophical about it. And, you could empathize then. Oh, I guess these people are really into it, But you just can't understand it for yourself. You don't see an attractive person and want to have sex with them. You don't ever see your partner and want to have sex with them unless you think that you should. But it's not a desire thing. It's like, oh, we should have sex. It's his birthday, or we are dating, so we have sex. That's what people do. But you don't ever yearn for it. You don't experience that desire to do it. If you never had sex again, you'd be happy. And you really felt like this kind of all throughout, and were somewhat confused when puberty hit and teenage years hit and people started to talk about like wanting to have sex, or like, that guy's so cute. You understood that guy's so cute, but then you didn't understand why then you would want to have sex with that guy. Like, that didn't make any sense. And so it's very interesting to think about, right? Because it's like a different orientation. And so if your wife was gay, you would be like, oh my God, it fucking makes sense. All of it makes sense. Finally, it's the missing piece. She just never was into men. Well, this one is she was just never into sex. And it's not very different. And so there's different kinds of ways you could be asexual. And some people are aromantic as well. So they don't really understand romance either. So, and that's pretty interesting too, because these things are really understood. They're not well understood. And I do believe that they are real and that they're not due to trauma. There is a type, even there's all these words now about the asexual spectrum. One of them, which I forget, is asexual due to past trauma. But there are plenty of people that haven't had past trauma, and there's all kinds of people in the world. There's all kind of orientations. Everything is normally distributed. And I deeply believe that some people just do not have sex. I mean, that is just, they do to procreate. That makes sense. They want children, but they don't really. And that's why, it hasn't, like, the trait hasn't died out, right? Because they have sex. They just they don't feel the desire for it. It's just a thing, like how you could be attracted to women or men or both or neither, and these are neither. They're not attracted to either. And so they could be sex negative, sex neutral, or sex positive. And so it was interesting. I always talk sometimes to you guys. I think you enjoy or so I've heard from a couple people that it's interesting what we do, psychologists in general, and the sorts of things we think about and discuss. And on the listserv, there was somebody who said, or not listserv, it was a Facebook group or something, and somebody was talking about a client where one was asexual and one wasn't. And there's all these younger people, and I've told you my age repeatedly, and I'm 42 now. And so there's these people who are in their 30s, et cetera, 20s, and they're saying, oh, okay, so basically the point was one person's asexual, one person's not. I chimed in, get the hell out of Dodge, right? In some sort of more professional way, I assume, possibly not. This is never going to work long term. Like, this person deserves to have a sex life. This other person's never going to desire them. They should split up. Then all these younger therapists, a lot of younger, maybe same age, I don't know, looked younger, on the profile pictures, said, well, there's different kinds of asexual, and, maybe they could do different things. Maybe they could be poly, so the one person has sex with people outside the marriage, or the relationship, and then, they just are romantic together. Or one person said, well, I'm asexual and I could have sex under specific circumstances in specific ways because I understand that sex is necessary for my partner and it would always be something I did for my partner. Now, of course, this person does not know how they're going to feel over time with changing, age and hormones, etc. But I found it to be interesting, right? That this would be posited as a solution. So this would be the example of a sex positive or a sex neutral asexual. Somebody who will have sex sometimes for the partner, doesn't have bad feelings about sex. Now, though, you can have a sex negative asexual that finds it all disgusting. It's really unpleasant. It's really disgusting. It's abhorrent. In that case, they really do not want to have sex. They're incredibly averse to it. They don't understand it, and they find it repulsive. So listen, none of these are the best case outcome, right? For somebody who is a sexual entity to be with an asexual is difficult, as it would be for a straight person to be with a gay person. But out of all the options, the sex negative one, that's the worst because that person really deeply finds this repugnant. I don't see a way ethically for these people to remain having sex, right? I mean, so the person doesn't identify as a sexual entity, never did. Now, of course, this is no bait and switch. Don't anybody go down that rabbit hole of bait and switch. Asexual, like the word just came out 5 years ago into the common discourse. Nobody I've ever talked to that ends up doing enough reading and saying that they were asexual ever knew about it. It's going to be different in this generation, for sure. But this coming up generation. But nobody that's even remotely in their 30s plus, if they say they didn't know about this before, you believe them because it is not widely publicized that this is even an option on the spectrum of human sexuality. Nobody ever even used to talk about a spectrum of human sexuality. You were straight or you were gay. That was it. Bi, maybe. But really, the spectrum thing has just been understood recently. But if you think about it, didn't you know asexuals? If you think about it in your friend group, among your teachers, among your bosses and coworkers, weren't there always people that kind of just didn't seem like sexual entities? Well, shit. That's what they probably were. Now, there's one thing that often confuses men who are married to asexual women, which is they say, but then why does she look nice? Why does she get dressed up? Or why does she try to look feminine? Well, she wants to fit in, she looks nice because she thinks that makes her look nice. There's only so many ways for people to look attractive, doing your hair, combing your hair, brushing your hair, looking neat and clean, wearing clothes that are, clothes for your gender. It doesn't mean they're agender. Doesn't mean they don't have a gender. They have a gender and they could be romantic as well. They just don't see any correlation at all between liking somebody and wanting to have sex with them or thinking somebody's attractive, including themselves, and anything sexual at all. They would never want a person to look at them and want to have sex with them based on how they're dressed. That is in no way in why they are trying to look nice or anything remotely like it. So if some of this makes sense to you, you might, there are quizzes online and things, and this isn't like a medical diagnosis. It's an orientation. And if your partner has this orientation, it can make sense of a lot of stuff, and it can do the number one thing that I'm always trying to do to help people is you cannot take their lack of interest personally. This is why I also tell you guys to talk about exes. I have a whole podcast, why to talk about exes. And if you cannot be insecure and you can go back through a relationship history, it can be massively illuminating. So for example, you could say to your wife, but I thought you had boyfriends, And she'd be like, yeah, but I didn't like sex, Like I never wanted to have sex or anything. It was just what we did, and we had sex, and they seemed to like it, and so I assumed that I did what I was supposed to do, and it was the same with you, only I liked you even more, And so I didn't mind it or anything, and I think I had an orgasm a couple of times, or so you want to have your mind blown. Some asexuals even masturbate, right? Because they like it. They like the feeling of it. Who doesn't, right? I mean, the other asexuals don't, or a lot of people don't, but I'm speaking colloquially. But the point is, you can enjoy having an orgasm and be an asexual. You don't associate it with sex. You're not fantasizing about sex. It is a nice feeling. It's a nice feeling to have, but you don't associate it with anything sexual. I know that sounds weird, but to somebody who's not asexual, but it's like the way that some people masturbate to go to sleep, but it's like that times a million, right? They just literally only feel it as a physical sensation. Now, this would be a better type of asexual for a sexual person to be married to, because they might still enjoy sex as a physical sensation, but this is why your dirty talk is so weird to them and they never say anything or whatever. Because they don't get it. They really don't get it. They don't get what you're talking about. They don't get why the things you're saying would be considered erotic. They don't do erotic. So they don't get the whole thing. The whole thing is so confusing, and they can sometimes understand sex very clearly as physical release. They don't want any foreplay. This can be done in a certain way that feels good to them, kind of masturbating with using another person's body. That they understand. Okay, every so often my partner needs release, and that I believe is kind of what the person was saying in the Facebook group with therapists. Every so often, as an asexual, I can do this with my partner, and also, it's not a biggie to me. It can happen, it cannot happen. I understand that. So a person who is asexual often would then say, okay, fine, go outside the marriage for sex. I certainly don't want to do it. So that's the other thing that can happen out of this discussion of having an asexual partner is well, listen, you don't want to do it, particularly if you're a sex negative asexual. But even if you're sex positive or remember, sex positive is just that they understand that other people like sex and they're like, oh, good, great. That's a good thing in the world, that people have sex and they like it. And sex neutral doesn't think about it one way or the other, but especially if they're sex negative, but even if they're one of the other two, to them, it's like if you went cooking with somebody else or you went roller skating with somebody else. It's something that maybe they don't want to do, not maybe, that they don't want to do anyway. So therefore, they don't have any emotional salience attached to it. They only wouldn't want you to fall in love with that person and leave them, but they probably wouldn't mind it, and many don't. And that's why the other solution was posited by other of the younger therapists who work with more of the asexual spectrum was, what about polyamory? And what about the partner getting the sexual needs met outside of the relationship? So I found it very interesting. And I have worked with some people who have discovered this themselves. And then there's some people who I've asked, after they say something that makes me think about it. But often you don't know this until much later on in your work with somebody, which is why I'm doing it as a podcast to expedite people potentially thinking of it as a possibility before they even come in. Because usually the women who are asexual sound a lot like the other women that are just burned out on sex and touched out, and, they're having marital conflict and they have no idea about responsive desire, so they never want to get themselves in the mood. So they look a lot similar, really. But the difference comes when you talk about when they were young, what they thought about sex. They never liked sex. They never really got it. They never understood it. Or when you say, did you ever see a person who's attractive and want to have sex with them? And they say, no, I never did that, And they don't really get that other people do that. They think it's kind of like a thing people say, like, oh, that person's so hot, I want to have sex with them. It's like saying, oh, that person's so hot, they should get a modeling contract, you know? It doesn't have to do with I, myself, and my genitalia would like to be involved with that human being who is attractive and therefore makes me desire sex. Like, it's like so far from that. It has nothing to do with that. All right, I hope that you guys found this pretty interesting. If you did, then you should Google more about asexuality. You know, you should really dive into it more because it is an interesting space that most people have not researched. You know, because they just don't think, they think of asexuals as like somebody that's not attractive, that wouldn't be in a romantic relationship, that doesn't have any romantic sense. It's not that at all. It's exactly what I've described in this episode. All right, I hope you found this useful, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great day, guys.